Concussion Chats is a podcast hosted by the McGill students for the Concussion Legacy Foundation with the help of Nick from Concussion Talk. We are dedicated to providing hope and strength to those suffering from concussions through sharing experiences. Today, I have a recording of Marc. Marc suffered a concussion almost 9 years ago playing basketball. He has been collecting ways of dealing with his symptoms ever since. He is an educator in a learning center, a part-time professor, and a proud father.
All right. Well, thanks very much. So yeah, my name is Mark. My pronouns are he, his, him. I wanted to start by saying that I'm really grateful that this exists. Those Zoom talks is the first time I'm joining, but I'm quite happy they exist, and I learned about the podcast, and I want to listen to them, all the ones that I missed, and I'm really grateful for the support group, and I want to thank everyone who's setting this up. As Taya said, like I suffered a concussion about 9 years ago, and I thought about like creating some sort of group like that, or seeing if there's something that existed and is like, this is impossible, would never be able to meet because I can't go outside because of my concussion symptoms anyway. So when I found out that this existed, I was really touched by it. So basically what I was hoping to share with you today was I wanted to tell you a little bit about my life before the concussion, and then like some of the key events that happened throughout my I guess my concussion recovery process, and then to talk to you about like some of the tough things that I have had to deal with, and then I want to talk about like themes that relate to hope, opportunities, and tips. So we'll see what we can get to. Before I got my concussion, I guess what I wanted to start with was to give you an general idea of like what my sort of ideal day would look like before my concussion, in terms of like what I would do if I was on vacation, if I had time, that kind of stuff. And so before my concussion, like I guess like an ideal day would be like I would wake up. I would, eat breakfast, go through my emails while listening to music, and then I would maybe read to some extent. I don't know, 45 minutes or to an hour. Then I would ride my bike to go to the golf course, because anyway I used to live, I sort of grew up close to the golf course, and play golf, and then I would come back home, and then I would try to go play basketball, and then afterwards I would try to go meet some of my friends, taking the bus. And usually what I like to do is, while being on the bus, I like to read on the bus, and to hopefully have a couple of drinks with my friend after. And the reason why I wanted to mention all those things is that, like, pretty much, uh, those were all things that, like, I couldn't really do for a long period of time. So meaning, like, just like going on the computer for an extended period of time, uh, while listening to, like, doing work, like listening to music, playing golf, I couldn't do for about like 3.5 years, playing basketball, sort of the same. And I'm still struggling with some of those activities. Riding a bike, it's not as bad, but it's complicated because I don't want to fall to some extent, or I didn't want to fall. Now, like, the things has changed, but like it's been there's been a couple of rough years, and then just being on a bus was just a struggle. And Obviously, I used to be able to read on a bus. I couldn't just read regularly. I used to be quite the reader, and just because for a variety of reasons, like it was just too much of a struggle for me. And obviously, drinks, like it was just like I was out of it if I would just drink anything. So anyway, so like there's that sort of contrast between like what sort of like I was hoping, what I want to be able to do to some extent, and what I could do. Now, the good thing is that, like, there's a good chunk of those things that I can do, but 9 years later, I'm still struggling. So as Taya said, about 9 years ago, I was playing basketball and I had the ball and I changed direction, and a guy was pushed towards me by accident, and we just went like skull to skull. And I know the guy suffered a concussion. I did too. And the funny thing is that at the time, because I used to twist my ankles all the time, I was like, oh, thank God I didn't twist my ankle. It was that sort of stupid reaction because it's like you watch the NFL and you're like, oh, that guy got concussed. We might see him again in 2 quarters or something. And it doesn't sort of work like that. And so that the idea is that like, okay, on the day of, I didn't know I had a concussion, but a couple of days later, I realized that's what was going on. But I was still with the mindset of like, oh, okay, in 2 weeks I'll be fine. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, okay, in 2 weeks I'll be fine. And 2 weeks later, and so 9 years later, I'm like, okay, if in 2 weeks it could be over, that'd be the best. But that's not exactly how it works. So yeah, so the way that I sort of realized to what extent, like I guess one of the first time where I realized to what extent like what I was facing, what I was confronted with, was so maybe 3 or 4 days after I got the concussion. I lived in this really tiny apartment, which was, I lived in Ottawa. The apartment was just basically bigger than I am. That's pretty much it. Like it was just this 1 bedroom apartment with anyway, it wasn't that big. And so I just tried to vacuum the apartment. Usually it would take me between, I don't know, about 15 minutes to vacuum the entire apartment, get all of the corners and everything. And midway through vacuuming that vacuum process that was supposed to last 15 minutes, I had to stop. I had to take a nap. I napped for about an hour and a half because I was just way too tired. Like I couldn't do it anymore. At the time, I was a graduate student, and that's when I was like, okay, I really have a concussion in 2 weeks. It should be all right. And so I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was affecting me and what I was supposed to do in order to, not suffer all those symptoms. And so I sort of try to keep doing some of the regular stuff that I was doing. So some of the studying, although I sort of gave myself like, 3 weeks off of doing nothing. And on one day I had to go to a presentation. I was supposed to do a presentation for about 15 minutes. The event was about like 2 hours, and I was sort of the last presenter, and I was holding the mic. There was about 15 people. It was more than that, and my hand kept shaking and shaking and shaking, and that's when I realized, like, how tired, like, just a whole bunch of different activities would make me that I couldn't really necessarily name. And then so that was like sort of another sort of highlight, like that sort of made me aware of what I was facing. um and so then, what do I have here? So yeah, a couple of months later, a couple of months go by, and I'm still struggling with a variety of symptoms. But I figured out ways to try to take care of myself more, be more comfortable with the idea of like, for instance, like sleeping as much as I really needed, which is at that time was about 14 hours a day. And but I, as I said about like my previous life to some extent, my dream day would involve a lot of sports. And I don't know about you guys, like, how you got your concussion, what sort of activities you got involved with. But I know a lot of concussion survivors, like they got them doing sport. And one of the things that they like to do is do sports. And that's like one of the number one activities you can't do. And when you got a concussion. So anyways, I tried progressively to get on a stationary bike. And so this one day I tried, and I was just on the bike, and I was just going at about that pace, like, which is the same pace as walking basically. And after like 8 or 9 minutes, I was out of it. It was just way too much. So anyway, like that was just another awareness moment, I guess. um so I ended up quitting my studies because, obviously I couldn't spend the time on computers, that kind of stuff. And I was just, it was just too much for me, and too overwhelming for a variety of different reasons. So that led me to like maybe a year after my concussion, I ended up finding the time to go online and to find some resources and be okay. I'm gonna try something. And so I found this person who's in charge of this group called Neurosport in Montreal. And so I had a visit with him, and we did some tests, that kind of stuff. And at the beginning, I was sort of nervous about it because it's like, I don't think that there's like any sort of like help that I can really get. And it was really expensive. But then anyway, I sort of trusted the process and I gave it a shot because I had nothing else really to try, which is, a big part of my story. Like, at some point I'm like, okay, I don't like where my life is. I got no other option, so I'm gonna try something. And so anyway, after the first meeting, like, he did a couple of tests, and like he told me about, like, the variety of different symptoms that I had. And so it sort of made me aware of symptoms that I had that I didn't know I had. I don't know if that makes any sense, because like, if you twist your ankle, it just affects your ankle, but when it's your brain, it affects, a wide variety of different things. And there was some weird things going on in my life that I wasn't aware that were associated with the concussion. So like some of those symptoms was like, for me, like I was, obviously, like I struggle with screens, like I guess like many of you. But like some of the symptoms I wasn't aware of is like, for instance, I needed to floss about like 10, 12 times a day. And I needed to go to the bathroom like, I don't know, 20, 25 times a day. And I was always thirsty. And so anyway, like the specialist I saw was saying, like, there's different kinds of symptoms that you can get depending on, how your brain is affected. And like for some people, that's one of them. Like those are sort of interconnected, like, the water just goes through your body, and like, your body doesn't use it properly. And so that's why, like, I didn't have any saliva, so I felt like I had to floss all the time, that kind of stuff. So there's, little small stuff like that. But then he also made me aware of like to what extent my eyes were significant, and like not being a like having, your eyes taking so much energy to try to like decipher like just visual information, to try to analyze visual information. So like it just made me aware of all the different environments where I could struggle with my eyes. So shopping malls, going to the market, going to the pharmacy, going to the grocery store. Just like, you're in a grocery store, there's a whole bunch of like different advertisements, different products that had like, their labels, and you need to find where they are, that kind of stuff. It was the same thing with a computer when you need to search for the information where it is, that kind of stuff. So anyway, like it was one of the hopeful moments, because like anyway, when I first met with him, at some point, like he told me, like I'm just coming out of disappointment with this woman who had a concussion, and she said, like, I don't have any more symptoms. And like I remember that day, like, I was trying to hold like to hold it in, but like I just wanted to cry in his arms, just because like there was just this little bit of hope that was there. And so one of the tips that he sort of gave me on that day was like to try to, like, when you struggle with visual information, uh like if I have to walk around or to go to different places, try to keep my eyes on something that's like really dark and um, um, that doesn't seem to reflect light that much. So it's like anything that seems to be the opposite of a mirror. So like, for instance, like this isn't dark, but that doesn't reflect light, like I don't know, like, the cover of phone or something like that. So anyway, so that was just something that just helped me, go through the world to some extent. Another moment then after that, like I felt was like quite significant for me was, I think maybe a couple of months later, it was the Summer Olympics. And I'm no star athlete, but I've just always really enjoyed sport. And as a kid, it was like just a big thing for me, like, that dream of like going to the Olympics. And so it's like, okay, I'm gonna go watch I'm gonna go watch the Olympics. And it was just like the opening ceremony, and I was seeing all those proud athletes, and I just burst out crying. Like I couldn't deal with it. Like it was just way too much. And So anyway, like I guess like it told me more about like my mental state and where I was. But then progressively, as like I saw more specialists, and like I found more tips and things that I could do. Like I was being able to start like anyway, I was increasingly in a better position to try to do different activities that I used to do. So about a year and a half after my concussion, I started to go dribble the basketball a bit and just to shoot a bit. But I was always by myself, away from others, away from other people's ball. But it was a big win for me. But obviously, like I really struggled with what I could do there. And then maybe 2.5 years later, I guess 2.5 years after my concussion, at some point there was this old guy who was saying like, "Do you want to come play with us?" And because he was old and because it was just like 2-and-2, just a small setting, I was like, okay, I think I can handle this and like stay away from elbows, that kind of stuff. So I went to play, and it felt so good. And afterwards, I played for maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes. I was like, this is too much. I gotta stop after 20 minutes. I left the park, and I was, I walked, yeah, I left the playground, and I was walking through the park here in Jerry Park, and I burst out crying again. It's like, anyway, because it had been so long, and anyway, it felt really good. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to mention with respect, like to some. Oh yeah. So the other sort of highlights or like important moment is that at some point, maybe I don't know, 4 years after I got my concussion, or just about maybe 3.5 years, I felt as though like I was functional enough in terms of like I could have a decent income, and I had enough energy so that me and my wife could, well, my now wife, she wasn't at the time, but we could try to have a child, which we ended up getting. It's not my language. I feel like I got it at the store. Anyway, anyway, so she gave birth to our daughter about 6 years ago. Anyway, I might be confused on the math, but anyway, it's just to say that like there's that possibility of at some point, like because when I first got the concussion, there's no way for me where I would feel comfortable enough to be, uh, responsible for a baby, losing the sleep, that kind of stuff. But it did happen, and I'm quite happy about it. So a couple of things that I wanted to share with respect to like some of the tough things I had to go through, that I'm sure that like a lot of you are going through. And like, anyway, I think it's sort of significant to talk about it to some extent. There's a couple of things that are somewhat significant, but anyway, I wanted to mention the one thing for me, like, so there's a couple of moments like when I first got after maybe a year, because for a full year, like I didn't work, I didn't study, or like I tried to do some sort of hustle at the university where I was, to get some money. By hustle, I mean like because I wasn't eligible for like working as a research assistant, but I sort of faked my way through being some sort of research assistant to get a little bit of money. But anyway, it didn't work. But that was, I guess that's one of the things that I have written on my sheet here, is just like having to lie. Having to lie in the sense that like I had to to try to tell different people, yeah, I'm gonna keep doing my studies, and like it wasn't true, and like, you know, I just needed like more time and it was gonna be all right. But I knew it wasn't the case. So that was one of those moments where I needed to lie or just pretend that like things are all right. Like, so for instance, when I got one of my first job was working as a part-time professor, but I was teaching up north, like here in Chicoutimi, where I would like they would sort of fly me there. I would sleep for one night a week and then teach, you know, two classes, and then I would fly back home. Which, you know, taking a plane with a concussion is not easy. And then I had to stay in a hotel, which is quite complicated. But I like there was this one moment where like because I was given a per diem like for food, like, you know, and so I was talking with people at the administration who's telling me like, you know, what were my options. Like I could go to the area to have my lunch there because it wasn't too expensive. I was like, yeah, true. I could go to the cafeteria. And in my head, it was like, there's no way for me I can go to the cafeteria. There's just way too many people. And, you know, it's just a subtle lie, but it's just like, anyway, is quite, anyway, I felt sort of uncomfortable. And at the same time, as I said, like I was sleeping in the hotel, and in the hotel, because I knew about like, you know, 5 minutes more. I was struggling with any types of light that was being reflected, and so there was those huge mirrors. So what I would do is like take the bed sheets and put them over the mirrors, and like I would, you know, as soon as my classes were done, I would go back to the hotel and just like, you know, stay in the dark listening to podcasts and like having those bed sheets. So it was like, anyway, there's just that contrast. Some of the things that I felt like was sort of quite difficult as well was just like interactions with friends. Obviously, I wasn't seeing as many friends as I used to. I was barely seeing any friends, but there was a couple of my friends who were like, I just come on, like wake up, like, you know, you're all right, like it's, you know, it's not much, and just it I felt like I felt they didn't know what I was going through. And then later on, I realized like I was that friend to other people prior to having a concussion, prior to knowing what it is like to have a concussion. Like I had said words like that, and anyway, and I remember I had one friend who was telling me like, oh, this other guy, like he ended up getting a concussion. It was like, oh my God, like, you know, what's going on with him? And he was like, oh no, he's all right. Like he's just fighting through it. So he's still at work. He's still doing this and that. And anyway, and he sort of said it in a way just to tell me again, like, just wake up. And anyway, um, I don't know. I just wanted to share that, like, you know, there's those uneasy moments. I'm gonna share, I guess, two last one in terms of uneasy moments. The other one was just like at the you know, I guess the peak of the worst or something, where so obviously like most of you had concussion symptoms, a whole bunch of different ones, headaches, you know, being tired, that kind of stuff, being confused, and at some point, like for whatever reason, I ended up getting some sort of chronic pain that was sort of like in the general butt area. And I won't go into more details, but I couldn't sleep. No, I could sleep, but I couldn't sit. And it lasted for about a year. And like there was some months where the pain was just like really, really bad, where I just lie in bed, not doing anything, that, you know, and I would struggle to sleep, and the pain was just there like throughout like about 18, 20 hours of the day. So, you know, having a concussion is one thing, but there's all those other things that you can get on top of it as well sometimes. And that's when like I never really thought of suicide, but I was like, if it gets to that point, I know what I can do. And anyway, I just felt really sad that I was in that situation. But you know, it is what it is. And I guess the one the one point which was the worst is that like, so I got that chronic pain, I got my concussion symptoms. I'm lying in bed, I can't do nothing, I can't play with my daughter at that point, because of that chronic pain on top of, you know, everything else. And I get the fucking hiccups. I was like, this is just too much. But anyway, like I ended up getting a surgery, and I found a doctor that could deal with it, and it ended up being good. So real quick, a couple of the things that I wanted to share in terms of opportunities, because when I first got the concussion, I really realized what it sort of meant. My mindset was like, okay, there's an opportunity here. And I was like, there's an opportunity here, and there's an opportunity. It's like, what is the freaking opportunity? But I ended up finding some, and like some of the things that I'm really grateful for in terms of like, having gotten that concussion was like the empathy that like I sort of uh, ended up getting to some extent that I didn't have prior to having a concussion. Meaning that like I'm just walking in the street, seeing people that walk weirdly, that like are struggling to walk and that kind of stuff, or just like living in the street, that kind of stuff. I didn't have that empathy, and then I was like, okay, that can be me, or that's me sometimes, and so this is something that like I'm really happy I got. And like, I felt more empathy for my father's dealing with chronic pain, that kind of stuff. And I realized that like, without the support from my family, because I feel quite privileged having the family I have, the girlfriend I have, at some point I felt like it would have been like so easy for me to end up being like a homeless person or something like that, because I couldn't work, I didn't have any unemployment, that kind of stuff. So I'm grateful for that, and for having my girlfriend who was going to the grocery store, and so I didn't have to do it. She would go to pharmacies, I didn't have to do it, that kind of stuff. The other thing, like learning to cry. At first, when I got the concussion, like I don't know, for some reason, like it was just like rain all the time. But then I ended up like feeling, becoming more comfortable with crying, and I think like it put me more in touch with my emotions, but I think like it just really opened up some doors that like I'm quite happy opened up for me, and I think like are going to help me in the long term. And this what else? Okay, well, I don't know, to like, do I have like 1 minute? Where am I, Emily? Yeah, okay. I wanted to share something real quick, just to show there's hope, and I guess like if we get to some question, I can share a couple of different tips, or at least like in the concussion support group, I'll definitely share like a list of resources, specialists, these here in Montreal who's helped me. So anyway, host disabled attendee screen sharing. Okay, I don't know if there's something. I think Emily, you're
Oh,
not.
I'll 1 sec. I'll make you a co-host.
Okay, all right, now I can share it. Anyway, a year ago, so now it's been like at that time it had been close to 8 years I had the concussion. Started to feel better, and I'm working with kids, and some of those kids are really into scooters and skateboards. And at some point, I decided I was going to step on a skateboard. And this is just to give hope that there's something that can happen out there. I don't know if it's a good thing to recommend at some point to try again on a skateboard, but this is where I am. So anyway, this is me. All right, so yeah, I'll just I'll stop it there, but you get what I mean. And I don't recommend skateboarding, but it's just for some reason, like I don't know, it's just like a challenge that I gave myself, and I felt comfortable with my head at that point, and for some reason, like being on something that has wheels like that, like it just helped me with like a whole bunch of my back muscles and my neck muscles to some extent. So as long as I don't fall, I'm good. Obviously, I practice how to fall, but I've at this point I feel as though I can do it. There's one or two times that I fell, but the helmet technology seems to be good enough for where my head is at this point, where it doesn't really affect where I'm at. So I guess I'll stop it here. I had a list of tips, but we'll see if we where this thing goes. Thanks for listening.
That was Thanks for the great talk, Mark. And today I have Emily, who is also part of the McGill Students for Concussion Legacy Foundation, Nick from Concussion Talk podcast, and his co-host Aaron, who's the coordinator for the Newfoundland and Labrador Brain Injury Association, joining me today to talk about about Marc's talk.
There you go.
I really, really, really enjoyed his talk. And it was definitely needed. His like story and like his share was just like the main thing I took away from it was just like hope and stuff, and it was really
He seemed emotional in it. That's all.
yeah, he like I think he got quite a few people fairly emotional too as well. But like it was just like it was really good.
Yeah, I like the fact that he was more emotional though too, because he mentioned near the end of the talk, he said he's more in touch with his emotions now and like prepared to cry and stuff, and that just kind of made it seem more real.
Right.
And it was evident through his story too that he was able to like kind of be in tune with his emotions and understand the process of recovery and getting through things.
Yeah, and one of the first questions that someone asked during our discussion was about the whole being more emotional and like being more aware of your emotions sort of thing. And I think that was definitely like it definitely was really important that he was able to like get choked up and like be emotional, and especially since like everyone's always like men can't cry and stuff. So I don't know. It was nice to see someone get emotional. Not because like, I want him to be like sad or like emotional, but like it was a good reminder for everyone, I think.
Yeah, and he just seemed very in tune with what he needed as well. Like throughout his story, he mentioned how he was isolated from a lot of friends and how like he had almost been mistreated in a way by them, but he knew that he had done that in the past before and was like aware of that. And then like he kind of knew two ways to calm himself down, like when he mentioned that he was living in a hotel for the teaching bit up north. He was like, he kind of made his hotel room a calm zone that he would go to after teaching all day. And I was just like, that's a really interesting and good coping mechanism. Like, even though it might not be the most functional, he knew he needed to do that and just lay down in a dark place.
Do you guys find that the audio is going weird? But that most concussion patients know exactly what's going on with them. The difference is, like I found out, listen to a lot of speeches, and all the other people know. The people who speak, I guess, are the ones who would know, but exactly what's going on, what's compared to how they were before. Whereas I know with my injury, I just didn't really know the difference.
Yeah, I think that like it's kind of like an aftermath thing, like reflecting on it. I think people definitely realize a lot more.
Yeah, no, I do it too now, but I mean, like, he knew, like I remember saying about the calm zone and knowing that, like, he needed to just step back and take rest, and you knew that you knew when you needed to do whatever, know, you'll get this, this will give you headaches, but I didn't know. I remember my injury, I was just like, I think Emily was saying the same thing, something as well.
Yeah, I think that there were times when I knew what I needed on a very, very basic level, like that sort of stuff. Like I knew I used to just like all the time, it became like a joke, but I'd just be like, I'm overstimulated, like if too much was happening. And it just meant that I needed everyone to back up. Like it would happen a lot in crowds when there was like a lot of visual activity. I'm overstimulated, and it meant just like I needed to go take some time alone. And so like on a very basic level, I think there were these like knee-jerk reactions that I had that definitely helped me recover. But I think I didn't really know what was going on with me because I just couldn't, like we've talked about it before, I couldn't verbalize what was different. I just knew there was stuff that was different. I became very like good at like knowing when certain stimuli were going to happen and how to avoid them. Like opening blinds, man, that's a risk. That is a concussion risk. And so I remember I was always like very, very careful, like opening blinds. If I felt like somebody was about to laugh really loud, like I was already cringing. Yeah. I saw people start to clap. I was already, trying to get away from the space. And that wasn't really like thought out processes. Like they were just, that was like trauma in reaction to trauma and protection of myself, which of course spun into being a little bit too much. But I really, really enjoyed how he was talking about the emotions. And I think some other people brought up the fact that they just like couldn't stop crying. And I think there is this like being in touch with your emotions and willing to cry. And then there's this like concussion thing that happens with some people where like, for me, like I could just be sitting there having a great time and all of a sudden I'm crying. Or somebody cracks a joke and I think it's so funny. No, I'm not laugh crying. I just end up start crying. Like it's like the emotions were a roller coaster. And of course I did not do what Mark did. I decided to just like try and check out from all emotions. But he did touch on that, the fact that if he tries to numb his negative emotions, he's going to numb his positive emotions in turn too. And I think that that's, I just went ahead and numbed them all. Yeah. But I think it's so cool that he was able to find that balance during his recovery. I think it's amazing.
When he said the thing about like when you try to numb the negative, like you numb all your emotions, I was like, damn, yeah, that's really true. Never actually thought about that. But that's so true.
You'll find that actually, you guys are, well, no, I know Emily is in neuropsychology. You're in neurosciences, aren't you? And Emily, you're doing neuroscience, and I know like you see like side effects of drugs like Xanax or whatever it is that deals with depression or anxiety. Then you find the side effects are like your emotions, you get dulled. You're trying to prevent anxiety. Your emotions are getting dulled because of that. Not meaning dulled, almost eliminated. So it's just a chemical thing in the brain, I guess.
Yeah. No,
but yeah, no, I found the same thing with like, you didn't crying like you were saying, like just to drop a hat, like having a good time. And I never had that extreme, but I did notice like I am now still is more emotional, but more kind of more appropriately emotional, like things that are sad that will be like not as sad as like crying, but like why should I used to be very stoic, really. So
yeah,
I still am a bit, but
I think
go for it.
Go on to. Oh, he was talking about when he was like at the Olympics, and it was like so much was happening, and he just started crying, and that would happen to me. Yeah. And I don't know that I always cried because I did get really good at kind of dissociating myself, but there were times where it was just like, so this overstimulation is happening, and I just didn't, like, where do I put all of that anxiety? And it was just like, it's like a breakdown. Like I totally related so much to that story. There were just times where it was like so much was happening and I didn't know what to do. And it was just like,
I think the Olympic thing, like part of that, like I don't think he meant it as like all of it was just like overwhelming, but he also talked about how like the Olympic thing, like that was like just like every kid when you're younger, like Olympics is like your dream and stuff, and like that sort of thing. Cool. But he also, when he was talking about crying, like just like being able to and stuff, like he always said that like it would only last like 2 to 4 minutes, like never anymore. And I think that also kind of like is like what you meant, where like you're just like overwhelmed, so you just cry. And I mean, like sometimes I'm like that, like like when you just get so angry that like you just don't know what to do, and like you'll just cry. Or like also just like being overwhelmed, just like you cry, get it out, and then like carry on with your day.
I think another interesting part he mentioned too that might tie into the fact that you would get so emotional is that he would often lie, he said. Like in the fact that like he didn't want to accept what was going on and pretend things were okay. So like he would pretend that he could go to the cafeteria when he obviously could not. And like keeping up that kind of facade that everything's okay, I'm good, will make you stressed, internalize, and want like just randomly have those outbursts of emotion.
And he said it feel really uncomfortable, like whether it was a subtle lie or like a big lie, like the pretending and like stuff like that. Like he knew himself that like no, he couldn't do like the cafeteria, or that he wasn't going to return back to like his studies, or like it was going to be longer than it was supposed to. But he like did lie. And I feel like part of that might also just be like because like people don't really believe the concussion stuff. And he kind of did like talked about like the couple of friends that like didn't really believe him, didn't know what he was going through, and then also just like him realizing that like he was that friend before. And when he was talking about how like now like when he sees someone that's, I don't know, like he says something about like walking slow or like something like that, like he kind of like thinks like, oh, like I wonder kind of, I don't know, he just seems like so much more in tune with everything.
Yeah, and he kind of like portrayed that as being a bit of a gift, I think.
Yeah, that was
able to understand what other people are. And I was talking to him afterwards, and he said, it's not even that I need to know what they're going through. I don't even need to know the cause. I can just understand that other people have stuff going on. And I won't necessarily understand it, but I can be patient with it. I think that's so...
I also loved
really cool.
his skateboarding video. That just like he showed us at the end of
I didn't see that, but
yeah, so he showed us a video of him like skateboarding. He was like I'm not trying to like encourage people to skateboard or anything like that, but just where he was at that point in time, like that was something that like he felt he could do, and he took every precaution he could, and he showed us like a little video of him skateboarding, and it was just like everyone like on the Zoom meeting just kind of like lit up, and was just like so I don't know. It was like such like a feel good, like hopeful, happy video and like moment, I feel like.
Yeah. So cool.
Well, he mentioned his dream day would be doing sports, and that sounds like it was a dream kind of living out for him then, because if for a moment you can kind of feel like everything's fine, then that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. It was that was and when he was also talking to someone about like, or no, I think it might have been in the talk about like the 2v2 like basketball with like an old man or whatever, and he played for about 20 minutes, and that was too much, and then he left, and he was just walking through the park like bursting in tears because it had been so long since like he got to play, and like it just felt so good.
And I loved that story because he like found someone who was to his ability in a way, and he was just like, it's this old guy, but you know, I could probably keep up.
That was awesome. I don't know, his share and his story was just amazing.
I don't know if he's spoken a lot, but he did seem to get more. As like his story started off, he's kind of sad, like not very uplifting as he got better. His story, his message got better too. I guess just what happens, but just it seemed to really buoy his spirits as well as I guess everyone else is in the group chat. I guess, but
I also really liked how like as he was like coming to the end and he was gonna wrap up, like he talked about like tough, significant things he went through, because he didn't just want everyone to think that like it was all like happy and easy, and like so he like highlighted some of the like shitty things, and then he also highlighted some of the opportunities that he got from it. Like he talked about like the empathy he ended up getting, the support from his family, and like how if he didn't have them, like he would have been homeless, and his girlfriend just helping so much, who's now his wife, and they have a daughter, and just the whole learning to cry thing, and he had mentioned some like I don't know what it was. Emily, did you guys talk about it more once I left? But he had like a list of things or whatever.
Yeah, I think he told us some stuff that probably wasn't on the list.
Okay. No, it was just, I don't know. I liked how organized it was, but I mean, he did say that he is a part-time professor, so I feel like he knows how to talk.
Paid the audience,
It was really, really good, and
I
That was definitely something everyone needed to hear for sure.
And
yeah,
I think we should. Sorry, my point is not important, so go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I loved when he was talking about how he's just having like such a bad. I didn't love it, but I really related to it. He was just having such a bad day, and all this stuff was happening, and then he got the hiccups.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
it's so pissed
And he was
off.
like, "It's over,"
Yeah.
and I was like, "Man,
That was
I relate
the
to that
last straw.
so much." Like, I like when my cup is full, and like I'm dealing with 17 million different things, and then like something so small like the hiccups happen. Oh yeah, I stubbed my toe. I drop a glass of water, whatever it is. I'm just like, yep,
Done.
life is done. Life is over. There's no point in being here now.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just it was nice to relate to that and like not feel as crazy when those moments happen, because it really is this accumulation of things. It's not about the hiccups. But then hearing them like get through those moments was really cool. And hearing him talk about how he felt like he was comfortable having a kid and then having a kid, like I loved that too. Yeah, it was amazing.
The hiccup one, that was just like so relatable, so true. And like you said, like stubbing your toe and then like that just becomes the end of the world. But it's not really about that thing. It's just like it was the last straw. And yeah, the hiccups and
or like a sneeze. Like
yeah, just anything. I really liked his share. It was really, really good. Do you guys have any last things to add?
I think just the only other thing that he said that really stood out to me that kind of was similar to almost everyone, I think, going through a recovery is the 2 weeks myth. It's like in 2 weeks' time, I'll be able to do this again. In 2 weeks' time, I'll be good. And it's like, that's just always the myth that you try to tell yourself at the beginning. But in fact, it's 9 years later, and he still deals with it all. But
no, that's so true. Because everyone's always told like the 2 week thing, and so that is kind of what everyone just thinks is like, okay, 2 more weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You tell yourself that tomorrow over there, Taya? Just 2 weeks.
I do not want to have quarantine, but I'm so happy that I get to go home for Christmas. I haven't seen my family since the beginning of March.
Oh.
And then one of my brothers since Christmas, but yeah. All right. So thanks again to Marc for the awesome talk. And thanks to Nick for helping us do this. We will have a new podcast posted Monday morning. Our upcoming podcasts can be found on concussiontalk.com, Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. You can find more information about our group on concussionmtl.com. Our peer-to-peer support group is free and open to everyone. We hold 3 weekly meetings on Zoom, which we will link in the description. Thank you for listening, and thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you.
Word.
HeadCheck Health bridges gaps in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Trek Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada, who rely on HeadCheck to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more. The music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.